All right, we're going to talk about emotional intelligence in law enforcement, and I call this the baseline for de-escalation. I started my career in 1983 as a cop in the U.S. Air Force, and incidentally, that was the exact same year that Dr. George Thompson wrote his first book on verbal judo. So here we are 30 years later, and what's one of the top topics that folks are talking about now? De-escalation. So about 12 years ago, I was contacted by a state agency that ended up in a predicament that cost them $30 million in a lawsuit. And they came to me and they asked me if I can help them with some de-escalation training. So I said, okay. Instead of going the traditional route, let me put some things together and see what I can come up with. So I looked up the word de-escalation in the dictionary, and I'll tell you what I saw. To decrease in extent, volume, or scope. Very vague, very vague. And I said to myself, you know, when I drink a glass of water, I decrease in volume. Is that de-escalation? By definition, it is, right? So I started doing some further research, and I ran across a guy named Daniel Goleman, who's the guru of emotional intelligence. Now, let me read you the definition of EI. So emotional intelligence, or EI, describes the ability, capacity, or skill to identify, assess, and manage the emotions of oneself, others, and groups. So think about that. The ability to manage the emotions of others and groups. And as an officer, right, who do we deal with? Others and groups. And of course, you have to manage the emotions of yourself. So the thing is, as human beings, we're emotional people. Whether we know it or not, we're driven by emotion. So think about it. My law enforcement folks in the room, when you decided to apply for your agency and they called you back, there was an emotion involved. If you have issues with flying, there's emotions involved. So everything we do, we're emotionally controlled. And especially as an investigator or former detective, that's one of the key things that I learned. So when you look at your de-escalation type situations, there's always a lot of emotions involved. So in order to be successful with emotional intelligence, there's 4 core abilities, starting with self-awareness. The ability to recognize your own emotions, how they affect your thoughts and behavior, and to have self-confidence. And one of the things I decided to do is I'm going to end this with Officer Goodwin from the U.S. Capitol that fended off those people and led them down a different path, and how his actions feeds directly into 2 of the core abilities in emotional intelligence. So in order to be successful in your 4 core abilities, you have to master these in order. Again, starting with self-awareness. So once you get past self-awareness, that's when we move on to self-management. The ability to control impulsive feelings and behaviors. So remember, we're emotionally driven, right? You get what we call triggered, that I'll talk about later. So no self-awareness equals no self-management, and then you end up on a YouTube video, okay? So self-awareness, self-management. Then we move on to social awareness. The ability to understand the emotions, needs, and concerns of other people, meaning those that you encounter. So again, this is all about emotions. And then finally, we have relationship management. The ability to maintain healthy relationships, inspire and influence others, work well in a team, and manage conflict. So again, there's this direct correlation between EI and de-escalation. So a little bit of how this works. When you receive information, you hear it, see it, smell it, touch it. It goes through the part of the brain that's here called the amygdala. The amygdala controls your emotions. Once you get past the emotional state, there's cognition. So have you ever been in a situation where you lost it and then you had that oh crap moment where you're hoping, exactly, that you didn't just get yourself in trouble? So what that is, you're emotionally controlled and then cognition kicked in. And the reason that we function that way according to Daniel Goleman, who's one of the gurus of emotional intelligence, it goes back to evolution. And the way he describes it is, you're out gathering food as prehistoric man did, and you see T-Rex, you instantly have that emotional response to flee, and almost simultaneously, cognition comes in and says it's T-Rex. It's a survival mechanism. In addition to that, we have what's called an open loop limbic system. That's a system that depends on external sources to manage itself. So that's why when you see a comedy, you laugh, you see a sad movie, you cry, things like that. All of that goes back to that open loop limbic system. These external sources is how we operate, that manages our emotions. So again, if you go back to our definition, the ability to manage the emotions of others, and you add that to that open loop limbic system. So me as an officer, already have the advantage. You're designed to be controlled emotionally by me because of that open loop limbic system. You just have to understand that and know it in order for it to be successful and work for you. So Daniel Goleman talks about something that he calls cognitive control. And the way he describes it, that goes back into that open loop limbic system, is the wise owl and the guard dog. So what does the wise owl do, right? He tells you wise things that will help you. What do owls do? They're wise. And what does the guard dog do? They roam around, make a lot of noise, they're excited, they're anxious, a lot of energy. When I teach emotional intelligence, I take away the wise owl and the guard dog, and I talk about emotional mind versus thinking mind. So if you look at your, let's say your video, an incident that one of your officers has been involved in, you can watch the video and see if there were an emotional mind or thinking mind. So remember when we were kids and you watched cartoons and you had the devil on one shoulder and an angel on the other? You guys remember that? Who always popped up first? The devil, emotional mind. And what does the devil tell you to do? Something irrational, manipulative, dangerous, is going to get you in trouble. Then the angel comes in, thinking mind. No, hold on, let's not do that. We're going to do it this way, right? So again, even as kids, we watched those cartoons. There was some psychology behind it, right? So if you take nothing away from this 18 minutes, I'd like you to remember thinking mind, emotional mind. And when you do internal affairs, things like that, and you watch your officers or deputies, you'll know which mind they were in. You don't even need sound. You can see the emotion in them. So the emotional mind makes decisions instantly, automatically, and is experienced through emotional feelings. Now, cops are late to the game, but guess who knew this type of stuff all along? Car salesmen. So imagine you go to a car lot, right? You see the shiny red sports car and a little black Yugo. Because we're emotionally charged, we automatically know which car is ours, right? We don't care about gas mileage, insurance costs, things like that, because we're running on emotions. That guard dog, we're running on the devil, and we're running on the emotional mind. And as long as, remember that open loop limbic system we talked about, as long as that salesman can keep you in the emotional mind, he's gonna control you. He's that external source. So again, cops are late to the game, okay? So the emotional mind is built up from gut feelings, past experiences, and beliefs. So with gut feelings, we're predisposed to respond to things in a certain way. So for example, Christy, I just call her right now because she works with me. So let's say you walk through the mall, see a lady come by with a cute little baby in a stroller. You look down at the baby smiles at you, and you do what? Exactly, because why? The emotional mind and gut feeling says that's how you respond in that situation. So let's talk about past experiences. So let's say Joe here, another coworker, the last 3 guys that he dated, last 3 women, sorry Joe, they all cheated on him. Here comes woman number 4, she does the slightest little thing, the emotional mind kicks in, oh heck no. not to go down this road again. So what does Joe do? Emotional things, right? He's checking her Facebook friends and Instagram and things like that. And what we think is baggage is the emotional mind protecting itself from further traumatic events. And then finally, the emotional mind operates within beliefs. So we have this belief system about how things work, how the world should operate, and how people should respond in certain situations. Now, I'll give you an example. Let's say you go to the movies, and the person in front of you already saw the movie. And before every scene, what do? They tell you what's going to happen, and how does that make you feel? Because the emotional mind is wet. In that situation, that's not how you act. So remember, gut feelings, past experiences, and beliefs. So now we're going to talk about what directly feeds into the de-escalation portion, and that's what we call an emotional hijacking. So an emotional hijacking is a state where your cognition or the thinking mind is overpowered by your emotions. So remember, we got an emotional mind, thinking mind, emotions come in first. The emotional mind overpowers the thinking mind, and we have what's called an emotional hijack. Your emotions hijack your thinking mind, and you respond emotionally. But I'm going to tell you before I'm done why the thinking mind has the ability to overpower the emotional mind in every situation. Let's talk about a formula that I came up with. Call it A plus B equals C. So in every incident, you're going to have an activating event, right? Plus your belief about that event. So you add A plus B, you come up with C, your response. It's either going to be an emotional response or a thinking response, okay? So we got A plus B equals C, activating an event, plus our belief about that event, the event, which equals our response. So let's see, we got A plus B equals C. Oh, sorry. Let's see where we want to go on. I want to talk about that a little bit. All right. Now, the emotional mind can be overpowered by the thinking mind for two basic reasons. Number one, emotions only last a few seconds unless re-stimulated. Okay? And number two, the re-stimulation usually comes from our own thoughts. So let's say you're in a traffic stop and pull somebody over for speeding, and they say, "Officer, don't you have anything better to do?" You know Dunkin' Donuts is open 24 hours, right? So you have the ability to do what? Get emotionally hijacked, or you can do like I did, and let's talk about that for a second. One of the things that goes with this is what we call trigger words. These are words that when you hear them, they instantly set you off. So for me, my trigger word was donuts. Here's what I did. I came up with a coping mechanism, right? So here's my coping mechanism. I'll pull you over for speeding. You make a donut comment. You'll never see me eat a donut in public, ever. I actually had one this morning. Anybody see it? Case closed. All right? So I'm going to tell the motorist, look him right in the eye, I don't eat donuts. Now what? So where does that leave him? I'm not on YouTube because I'm thinking mine. That leaves him nowhere. Sit there, wait till I write this citation, you can be on your way. Okay? So again, emotions only last a few seconds unless re-stimulated, and the re-stimulation comes from our own. So one person, just give me an example of a trigger word. One person. Second.
It would be, I pay your tax. My taxes pay your salary.
My taxes pay your salary. That's a good one. Okay, so you're gonna look for a coping mechanism so that when he hear that, he doesn't get hijacked. But remember when we talked about the first core ability was self-awareness. So the fact that he knew that that could trigger him, let me tell you how that self-awareness works. You get up in the morning and we put on our suit of armor and we say to ourselves, what things can hijack me? That's good self-awareness, right? Understanding your own emotions and feelings, how they affect your thoughts and behaviors. So now, when he hears that word, when I hear the word donuts, I have the ability to exercise good self-management, the ability to control impulsive feelings and behaviors. So you see how it all comes together? Okay, so One of the things that gets us in trouble is what we call self-talk. So these are the words that we tell ourselves when we get in these situations, and your self-talk can lead you down the path or the wise owl or the guard dog, right? So for example, we'll use the I pay your taxes thing again. So if you say to yourself, this is your self-talk, that SOB, I'll show you who pays whose taxes, right? You get emotionally hijacked, and what are we doing? We're running on emotions, and we already talked about the devil and an angel, so we know how that's gonna work out. So what I do, my self-talk that I give myself, instead of saying this guy's an SOB, and he's peeing me off, right? There's a strong emotional attachment to that. So my self-talk says, oh my goodness, this guy's a clown. What do we want to do with clowns? We want to laugh at them, right? It's easier to control laughing at this guy than it is being those strong emotions where we go down that guard dog path. So our self-talk is important. Things that we say to ourselves when we're in these situations. And again, pull up YouTube videos and you'll see exactly what I mean. And you can just ask yourself, I wonder what that guy's self-talk is that's driving him down the emotional path instead of down the cognitive path. So one of the things that I want to talk about is Officer Goodwin from the United States Capitol on January 6th. So when a lot of folks look at what he did, I look at it from an EI standpoint, an emotional intelligence standpoint. So for me, I would say that officer had good self-awareness and good self-management. So when he got up that morning and he went to work, as he put on his uniform, he knew the things that he could face. He knew what could trigger him, which allowed him to do what? Exercise good self-management. Now, the key for me in self-awareness is self-confidence. So imagine yourself facing an angry mob in a building that's being overrun, and look at the confidence that he had. That strong self-awareness that he had, right? That strong self-management where he controlled impulsive feelings. That's my time thing. It's where he controlled his impulsive feelings, and he had the confidence in himself to be able to lead those folks away from where they're supposed to go. Okay? So again, if you take away nothing else from this, remember, right, emotional hijacking. Remember that open loop limbic system where you all are designed to be controlled by external sources. That external source. As an officer, I have the ability to make you laugh, cry, etc., etc. So when I teach a 4 to 6 hour EI course, I tell folks, as a radar operator, I will write 100 tickets a month, and I will have people thank me for giving them a ticket, because I understand emotional intelligence, and that puts us into social awareness, the ability to understand the emotions, needs, and concerns of other people. Real quick, did an attempted murder case, had a guy, he was on the verge of confession. Social awareness, his needs is what, and concerns is what? Going to jail. Here's what we're gonna do. Tell me what happened, put it down on paper. I'm gonna leave, let yourself get an attorney, and you can turn yourself in the next day. Now, we as cops, we know that doesn't work like that. But what did he do? He wrote that statement, because what did I do? Worked on his emotions and controlled his biggest fear, going to jail, just by telling him you're not going to go to jail tonight. So little things like that. Let me give you something I want you to practice. You go to McDonald's. The person working at McDonald's typically makes what? $8, $9 an hour. They get fry grease on them all day. Guess what? They all have a name tag. Go to McDonald's, address that person by the name tag. Hey, Christy, how you doing? Right? You're automatically controlling her emotions by what? Acknowledging her. Something that nobody else does. And then watch her and see, doesn't she get as many fries in your bag as she can fit? Right? Okay. So I'm over my time. If you guys have any questions. Okay. So the two flexi guys in the back before I started, I needed one thing from them, not to throw nothing at me. So I want to thank you for that. All right. And I'm here. So if you have any questions. So thanks, guys.